Okay. Okay, so I'll start going through some of the responses to the questions we've had, and I'm recording this so that I can post for anyone who hasn't been here. Um, okay, and so I'm going to go through some of the initial questions that have come through. You're welcome to like raise your hand or ask follow-up questions, or we can take another pause after this and do some follow-up. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to speak to is the limitations. So the limitations, there's actually two kind of questions that came in around this. So limitations are going to be placed into your discussion section. If you look at your rubric, I'm really looking for you to address limitations. It's an important part to any review because you had to make kind of judgment calls, right? And there's other types of limitations too. So there's a whole section on that in the rubric for 5 points, and you'll put it in the discussion section. So another question kind of related was more about the formatting, like with the headers, like level 1 headers and then level 2 headers. That just means like kind of like indented, or in some journals, there'll be like different color codings and things like that. So that's a stylistic thing that can vary across journals. So like when you're composing your manuscript at first, you can kind of do it however you want to for yourself, but then you kind of have to like check and see if the journal has a preference. You also need to check and see if they want subheaders or not sometimes. And so if they don't specify, again, it's kind of up to you as a preference. So for instance, since you're putting the limitations within the discussion section, you all can make that like a whole subsection if you would like, or you can just have it, as a paragraph or a portion of that section. Okay, so next question is, okay, this is a great question. I'm sure a lot of you either have kind of mixed types of methods coming through with your sources, either qualitative or quantitative, or maybe most of your work is qualitative. And I know I only linked the resource for kind of how to rate a more traditional, like scientific um, RCT, the whole, scientific pyramid, how to rank those levels of evidence. Since I haven't provided the source for the qualitative, I'm going to leave it up to you, and I will just say, as just kind of a side caveat, that that's kind of where the qualitative world lives. And so you can just speak to kind of the breadth. Um, if you're well trained in qualitative research, there are things that every qualitative study should include. I'm not asking you guys to get into that level. We're not interested here in training you to know how to construct a, high level qualitative study. So I know that, the basics of a good scientific study were things that were in our evidence-based structure. And so I felt comfortable asking you all to at least make an attempt to kind of think about your levels of evidence, right? But again, I'm trying to stay grounded to kind of the scope and what our objectives are with this assignment, if that makes sense. So I'm sorry it's not going to be a great answer, Janae, but it's going to be up to you to kind of figure out a way to speak to that. So it unfortunately may not be as clear cut. And so it's okay. You don't have to assign levels of evidence. It's just kind of a nice thing to include in your data table if you can. But it's something that you can describe in your inclusion exclusion criteria, and it's a way where you can kind of get at that. Okay. And I'm sorry, maybe I called you out too on answering that question, but okay. Prisma checklist. So now that's all I wrote, and Prisma checklist. So it should. Great. Okay, well, I know one question with the Prisma checklist was related to the column on the data items. Let me pull that up. Um, okay. So on the left-hand side, there's a column and it'll say data items, and it's item number 11. And it's asking whether you have listed and defined all variables for which data were sought and any assumptions and simplifications that were made. So variables for which data were sought, this is getting at, again, both decisions you made in terms of your search terms and what was going to answer your question. This is going to get at also in your paper where you talked about your inclusion and exclusion and how you were extracting data and decisions you made around that. So that's all you have to worry about this, you guys. Don't put a lot of thought into this. So if you have done, hopefully maybe both of those things, but either or, just list that on your Prisma checklist and you're good. Okay. And then there was one question about where to find guidance on how to assess levels of evidence. I linked um, I linked a resource that you have to go down a little bit into the resource, and there is a table, and it basically shows the levels of evidence, and then it gives like descriptors. And so that is something you can reference. Something that I put in the description, I believe, by the link. I'll go back and check. I hope it's not confusing. The title, it is for systematic reviews. And so there's this kind of wonky thing that's going on right now with systematic reviews and scoping reviews. Scoping reviews are kind of like relatively new to the scientific scene. If you notice, the Prisma scoping review guidelines were published in 2018, so they're relatively new. And so it just means that in a lot of places, sometimes you have to, if you're doing a scoping review, you're defaulting to systematic review, if that makes sense. And that's totally fine because you're moving up in the rigor scale. So if you're defaulting to systematic review guidelines, that's totally fine. So in this case, we're doing that. We're using a guideline that was written for when you're developing a systematic review, but we're going to just pull that and use it for scoping review. Okay, and so that is linked in Moodle, and I see more stuff coming through the chat, so just give me a sec here. Okay. Prisma checklist and AJOC checklist. That was another question, and I think that was the question that I'm sorry I wasn't remembering. It was just an easy question about like clarifying that we are to submit those, that you are to submit those and where to submit them. Please submit them just as separate documents. Just go through, click, save it, and then just dump it in with when you submit your review. So it'll be 2 documents. I don't want you guys to put a lot of energy and time into those. It's just kind of just a check it off the list. Check the checklists off the list. So if Moodle is not allowing you to submit all of those pieces, I don't want you to stress. I want you all to submit your scoping review first, and then please try to submit those other ones behind. If not, we're not going to freak out about it, okay? That is not a huge importance for this assignment. Okay. And then, yeah, Nikki, thank you for putting text reply. Okay, one more question. Do we need to list line numbers and page numbers for the Prisma checklist? Yes, and so if you see, Prisma actually says reported on page number. I have put, when I have done it for manuscript submissions, I'll put the page number, but sometimes I'll also just put the line numbers after it. So it's up to you, because usually it's not a whole page, right? And so it allowed me to be more specific with like some of those different little like tiny points that they ask about. So that's what I did. But again, I'm not going to dock you. It's not going to be if you just put page numbers and follow the directions, I really respect, and so now I'm going to like quickly move into something that I just wanted to speak to. I really respect how fine-tuned you guys are being with the formatting. It's great, and it actually makes me really smile. But something I just want to like relay to you all is I kind of want to do just like a check-in with you. Um, so if you go to the rubric for this assignment, I have assigned, I think it's like 5 points to APA and 5 points to grammar and I don't know, any of this kind of like formatting stuff. And it is like 10 or 12% of this assignment. So I really commend all of the effort and interest in trying to do this the right way because, that is the assignment too, right? Is to like go through the process and see what it takes to kind of develop a peer-reviewed submission. But I was really hoping we'd get more discussion and more thought, and I want you all to put more thought into the content and those sections. And one of my biggest reasons and why I thought it would be helpful and kind of nice to pull in these like guidelines as kind of like an additional, almost like beef to this assignment and support to this assignment is guidelines actually reiterate a lot of like that content for these sections, right? And what these sections look like and should include, etc. And should include relative to the journal. And this journal is so specific to OT. So those sections, I just really liked it for that. So that is what I want you all to be like really putting your energy and focus to. And so I have the rubric here somewhere. So like on the rubric, I do want you to have all of the sections that you're supposed to have, right? So I put 15 points to that. I put 15 points to your discussion section where, again, you're going to have to pull in outside sources. You might be citing things that are, you're thinking bigger, like you're thinking about the context of what your work has done. So that is where I really want you guys to be. And that is the point. That is what we're trying to get at with this assignment. That next level, oh, Sarah's been in the waiting room. That next level, thought of taking this evidence, thinking about it in the context of your problem, your question, and how does it relate to OT? This is like the beefy stuff. This is the good stuff. This is what I want you guys really spending your brain power on. So it may be that I'm fielding a lot of questions around the formatting just because that is the newest for you all. And so I get that too. And so I'm excited and I hope that you're also, really putting good thought and energy into more of that content component. Because again, so implications and conclusion sections show evidence of alignment with discussion sections, 10 points. So all of this stuff, just I want you to put an emphasis on that, if that makes sense. The author guidelines I was hoping would just kind of like add to that. Okay, I am going to stop with that for now. Stop the recording at least.